What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of a Thinking Man's podcast. I'm your host. My name is Joseph PIRCHER. With me, as always, my good friend out on the West Coast, Tommy Stiles. Tommy, how are you?
Still trying to absorb that Arnold.
I
What
know
a
we are
show.
just,
What a kick off the contest season.
man, um, one of the best just top fours. If you just remove the names and the shows, just one of the best Final Fours that I've seen in an open pro show in a long time. That couple of those still photographs that I've seen of the top four, like all four of those guys in a hands clasp, most muscular all at once. Man, that's a top four that's packing a ton of muscle. So it was cool to see, and we had guys that were at their best. I think we even had a resurgent Rami, which was cool to see. Um, so really cool. But we are going to dive into Q&A episode, listener Q&A episode. Um, Good time also to mention that we have a Facebook group for the show. This is typically where we like to go to pull some questions. So if you particularly want us to notice a question of yours for one of these episodes, give us a request for the group. We'll let you in. I have one that I'm going to start with, and I'm going to kick to you.
Fire away.
I know this came up because we did the whole volume discussion, and I think this was even discussed a little bit as like a thread conversation in the Facebook group. But I had somebody ask, going from blast to cruise, should food and training volume come down to?
Last to cruise should food not as like a black and white requirement, but maybe, for me, I'll use myself as an example. It wouldn't, unless it was like down the line into that cruise, it seemed necessary. But if you're someone who maybe has a propensity to put on fat at a higher rate, then I could see the need to lower food, being on lower PEDs. And I imagine training volume is going to eventually lower being on the lower PEDs. So, like everything on this show, it's context dependent, but I wouldn't make it like my gear's down, so I'm going to lower my food right away. I mean, I don't do that with my people. I like to see like what a week or two does, because even though you're going from a blast to a cruise, it doesn't just mean your body kicks all those excess hormones out right away.
Right.
That's why I laugh when people like talk about their strength being down the minute they stopped pinning,
And
their blood. I'm like, you still have a good 4 weeks before you might start to notice the feeling in your body of like, oh, okay, I'm back on TRT.
yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I was going to say. 4 weeks, because I've had people, especially some of these younger guys, and they all want to cruise on numbers that are higher than what a cruise for a 24-year-old kid should be. And then immediately on week one, they're like, man, that dip in hormone is just such a noticeable difference in my training. And it's like, nope, couldn't possibly be, because you're probably going to be elevated for, like you said, about 4 weeks, I would say. But yeah, the best answer, I think, in terms of going from blast to cruise, should food and training volume come down to, I think it just depends. Like Tommy said, I think this is a good example of the benefit of working with one coach for a while and letting them learn about you through different seasons of bodybuilding. That way you should have an idea. If this is your first time making this type of transition with that coach, it's tough to say. In that scenario, you would probably just want to let it all play out and adjust only as needed. And instead of trying to force the body into a particular response, you have to just follow it and adjust. If you've worked with a coach for a long time, if you've gone through this period before, you guys should have a pretty good idea. That coach should have a pretty good idea of whether or not these things should be adjusted or not, given that you were relaying that feedback the last time you went through that process. So it depends. I think you and I are, like you said, are good examples of this. If I were coaching you, knowing you the way that I do, I wouldn't touch anything. If we were going from blast to cruise, I would adjust the drugs as needed and say, just keep doing it. Don't change anything.
I
For
can
me,
say for me, the training volume naturally, like it almost is like if I'm just listening to my body, it naturally will drop down as I hit week 3, week 4, and so on. And it's like,
yep,
I might call an audible in the session. Like if I had something that was 3 sets, but set 2 was hard and I failed early before the end of the rep range, I'm just not doing set 3 because I don't need to that day. And then I'll
yep,
make a note of it for next time. And then, if I wrote out my total sets per session as like a graph and week to week to week, you would see less overall sets as I get deeper into the cruise.
yep.
And then when gear goes back in, you would start to notice I slowly titrate that volume back up. You have to have a couple rounds through it to really start to learn your own body. But I think for the listeners, like the training volume and understanding how much volume you need, your coach can help with that. But a lot of that's going to be, what am I feeling on this day? How am I feeling week to week versus, well, my food got lowered, so that must mean I have to lower my training volume. Like it doesn't have to be like cause and effect type approach. It's just more of like, how am I feeling? What's the effective volume that I need given the variables I have? And then just listen to the body.
And part of the volume discussion that we had last week comes into play here too. Because if we're talking about should we be proactively reducing volume or taking a guess, basically an educated guess at whether or not we should lower volume, well, it just depends on what volume we're talking about and the nature of that volume. I mean, are you doing 5 by 10 on leg press, and that's crushing you systemically? The lower your food gets, or maybe the more that those hormones start to clear your system, yeah, it would make sense that you probably couldn't continue to recover from that. Are we talking about cable curls? Like that's a different story then. So I think the nature of the volume also needs to be considered. And then with food too, I think diving into a little nuance in that perspective alone, for me, I am someone that I would just right off the bat start to reduce some carbohydrates. And that's because I know it's going to just stick around as fat. Like when I'm at peak off season, peak high body weight, peak PEDs, my food is at a peak as well because those other aspects are also at a peak. So it just has made sense for me, because in keeping those basically super physiological calorie amounts, let's say, as you transition to lower hormones, I've done that in an effort to just say, hey, I'm just going to hold my body weight. And then you wind up looking pretty soft and you're kind of just putting on new body fat. So it depends. But I think all in all, I think that's a pretty good summary. What do you got?
So we had a question in the Facebook group that I saw today about, but not to that one yet. First, I want to ask basically, since this is a good dichotomy, because I personally love Primo, you use Masteron as your secondary to test. So what is a comparison for people? I got somebody messaged me the other day and asked me, like, almost, and this happens all the time, it's like, which is better, either or. And we're always trying to send the message. It's not one or the other. It's not A or B. It's maybe you want A, maybe you want B. That doesn't make one superior or inferior. So what's your reason for choosing Masteron as your secondary compound?
Price and reliability for me in my individual circumstance.
Yeah,
because I can get Masteron 200 milligrams, for about 100 a bottle, which winds up being about twice the product that you would get for about $100 bottle of Primo. That's 100 milligrams, right? So it's like my money's going basically twice as far. And a lot of times, man, I just have not had a trustworthy Primo Ball source. And being that they are so similar and I don't have those doubts about the Masteron, I've just gone with Masteron. From what I've heard and seen with people, I've heard enough now to consider making a switch, like making a concerted effort to switch from mass to primo if someone was in a gaining phase or a growing phase. I think both work and they're probably just about the same. But when 10 or 15 longtime bodybuilders anecdotally tell you something, you learn after enough of those instances that you need to consider that theory then at that point. So I think there could be something to primo assisting you in growing better. Now, I've had great runs of growing on mass, but if I did have a reliable source, I would give it a run. So I guess really it just comes down to the reliability is just the big one, I think.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, hugely valid. A lot of the decisions I make based off of my guys, whether to use, Masteron or Primo, comes down to what type of job do you have? What type of budget do you have?
Right.
Are you like are you interested in bodybuilding? Like, is this kind of a phase, or just like, hey, I've been doing this 5 years, I'm hiring you to like take me up the ladder? A lot of different factors to consider. And that next question the question from the Facebook group dove into, estrogen modulation, and we'll get into that. My reason for choosing Primo is I've never had negative issues. I can cross off the box of knowing it's legit. It's not fake. There is a lot of counterfeit Primo on the market. If it sounds too good to be true price wise, it is. If you think you've found some secret source that's $20 to $30 less than what the going rate is, it's not legit. I promise you, you're not getting a deal. Don't waste your time. There's no golden nuggets in this game right now.
Don't waste your site injections either on that, because if you're spending substantially less than market rate on Primo and then putting that in you, man, good luck.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very,
even the real shit is not a fun experience.
It can sting. And that's why, also we talk about the concentration. You can get masked for 200 megs of CC. That doesn't hurt either.
It doesn't. I do it sub Q that's another consideration. I prefer to do my stuff daily sub Q, so I can get away. Like the mass is easy to get away with doing that because it doesn't lump the same way that I have found Primo Bowl into. And then, like you said, I'm getting twice the product at half of the oil volume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is a huge win, because I have had Primo made at 200 megs of CC, and it felt like a tetanus shot. That's what my injections felt. That was like my arm was like, I just had a tetanus shot.
Yeah.
And so to cut down on volume and save some money, or to save money on the vial, it ended up feeling like I got punched in the arm 30 times every time I did something. So that's another factor. So, you're going to have a higher total milliliter volume when you're using Primo, especially as you get to more advanced doses. Now, you want to ask that question from the Facebook group? So before we get into estrogen modulation, I choose Primo because also for me personally, Masteron really modulates my estrogen to a negative point in the opposite. Like it's too low, and I'm not as strong when my estrogen's that low.
Yeah. So then for me, you're right. We're just the reverse of that. So for me, I'm super sensitive in terms of my testosterone aromatizing to estrogen, so much so that I had gyno even before I used anabolics. I had gyno as an early teen going through puberty. I recently just had the gyno removed. So with that said, I could probably get away with the Primo Bowl, and that would be another argument for it. But that ability for Masteron to modulate estrogen down was also a positive for me, because I have had out of range high estrogen on as little as 140 milligrams of test per week. So doing that, I run a PED model that does not include aromatase inhibitors. So then it's like, what are my options to bring down this hypersensitive response to estrogen? The Masteron makes sense. And so I would run like a really high ratio Masteron to test.
Right. So
Very context, very individual.
I'm going to make a sign that just says context is king and hold it up every time we answer a question.
I wonder if anybody would buy a shirt that said context is king, because that's kind of our phrase.
If you would, put it in the comments on YouTube or on the Facebook group. And
yeah, we'd have to come up with a dope design.
And by we, someone much smarter and cooler than us.
Oh, so. For sure. Yeah, yeah. Meaning I have to find someone to pay to make us a dope design.
All right. That kind of segues into the next one. This came from the Facebook group. You kind of just touched on it with yourself personally, but can you discuss the ratio of test to mast and or Primo that you have found works for most to make sure estrogen is not too high or too low?
Oh man, it's so individual.
Right.
Works for most is a tough one. In my situation, I also was not, it was not the deciding factor in the dosage. I'm not choosing how much anabolic I'm running just to say, man, I need to run this much Masteron to drive my estrogen down. That's a silly reason to run high doses. I ran it at a high ratio because along my 10-year journey, that is where I had escalated to in that time, and what fit my goals and my timeline. It just depends. It's not so much a ratio. This will be a better answer to serve as a general staple or rule. It's not a set ratio. It's not like I'm saying I need this guy's DHT to testosterone to be 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 or any of these ratios. It's the process of finding the testosterone total that works for this person where they feel excellent. Their libido is high. Their joints feel good. Everything is healthy. And they're able to do this without running an aromatase inhibitor. So there's no negative estrogenic side effects. Their testosterone is in a good spot. Their estrogen is in a good spot, and they don't have to run an aromatase inhibitor. Let's say that's 210 milligrams. That seems to be around a general idea for most people because that comes out to 30 milligrams a day. From that point, I'm just going to push anabolic up, DHT up based on that person's goals, timeline, how much muscle they have, how committed they really are, how many years into the game they have, what their blood work looks like, all these different things, because it needs to be, the milligram total needs to fit the scenario. But I wouldn't look at it, long story short, I wouldn't look at it as a ratio. If that type of model where you're not going to run an aromatase inhibitor sounds like something you want to try, first, based on rounds of blood work, you want to find just the test total that you need, no aromatase inhibitor. And then from there, I would just slowly but surely work your DHT up.
Yeah, like you nailed it. It's kind of trial and error. It's going to be, you're never going to, like the first time you run a cycle with this method, you're not going to probably nail it. You're going to learn things along the way. You might need to go get, you'll notice some sides kicking in. And the best thing you can do then is go get your estrogen check. Go get an a la carte through any one of these private blood work. You can have your results within a day, maybe 2. And then you can kind of see like, okay, I have these symptoms and this is the number I'm seeing on blood work. I can note that number is something I can't exceed, or I need to stay, maybe 10 to 15 points below that. For me, it's always, there's no set ratio as much as it is like, I've had estrogen in the 70s on blood work. And for me, I was big, but I was also getting a lot of bloating when I was eating. I couldn't push my food. I had gas. I had issues getting my meals down. I then had a lot of like back sweating, and not like chronic acne, but a couple like cystic like acne nodules showed up, and I never have issues there. So for me, I learned based off the symptoms I was having, and then I was able to match that to the 70s or whatever the number I saw. I was like, I need to stay lower than that. And
Tommy, let
then
me ask you, what was your cycle or ratio then? Like what caused all that? Were you
that
running
part,
just high test without an aromatase inhibitor?
yeah, I was post show one
Okay.
year. I think I was just doing tests, and there might have been like an estrogen rebound too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I can run. I've been over 1,200 milligrams of testosterone and seen, and with the Primo dose I was using, my estrogen was in the 40s, which is
Wow.
kind
That's
of
right on the
right,
money.
right where I like to sit.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
thing to people, don't having high estrogen number wise on your blood work isn't a negative if you're not having any side effects.
Right.
Keep that in mind.
Simply put, it's not a negative if it's not a negative.
Right. And I think there's this thought process that, we're going to take our test and we're going to jack it up to super physiological limits.
Right.
But
And then
we're
we have
going
to
to
crush the estrogen down.
we want to keep the estrogen in this little parameter, like,
Yeah.
20 to 46 or whatever the range is.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a ratio of test to estrogen. That's why I like to see people's blood work when they've been on just TRT or they're natural. I like to
Yes.
see the what are you a high responder and low
Yeah.
estrogen? Like, what type of person are you? I've got a guy who I had who was like TRTs in his 30s. He sits in the 900s.
Nice.
He's super hyper responder. So for him, my protocol would be probably a higher amount of Primo and less test, like you, because he's going to probably aromatize at a faster rate.
Yeah.
So it's just all about finding, different individuals. I'm someone who doesn't aromatize very heavily, so I can handle a lot of tests, and then I can just use, for me, Primo does a really good job at modulating estrogen and allowing me to take up my total anabolics.
Yeah.
Masteron works too well. So for me, it wouldn't be a good choice.
Right.
In prep, when the goal is to obviously take estrogen down as you're dropping body fat, then yeah, Masteron probably gets swapped in at a certain point. But there's people, they want to answer like, what's the right ratio? There is no right ratio. If you get caught in that type of thinking where you're looking for a black and white answer, you're going to spin your tires. Bodybuilding doesn't work like that. It's about finding what numbers work best for you, least amount of sides. Having high estrogen on your blood work doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get gyno either. Again, like you said, if it's not a negative, don't fix it.
Yeah, I have seen guys that have run estrogen as high as 120 and they feel like a machine. Like their libido's through the roof. They feel strong as hell in the gym. Digestion and sleep are good. Like, that's just some guys. Now, that's definitely an outlier. Don't get me wrong. That's definitely an outlier. Like you said, you are not someone that aromatizes easily. You got all the way up to the 70s or 80s to really feel like some wonky side effects. So for most people, I would say, like you mentioned, and it was the same case for me, I have seen anywhere from, just as a general rule, like 20s to 40s, most males that are enhanced, when they are consistently within that range, they feel pretty good across all the parameters. And it just, on what end of the spectrum you are, it just depends on some of these other variables that we talked about. So I think your other compounds also depend too, because, if you're running 19 NORs, you're running trends, something like that, that could throw things off as well. So I could throw off not only could it throw off your blood work, but generally just how you're feeling and responding to things, because you've brought a whole nother universe into the picture. So yeah, those are good questions. I mean, I think the best questions are not ones that necessarily end in a hard black and white answer, more so get us talking through just the thought process of how we might arrive at an answer based on their situation. So I think that was a good question.
Yeah,
I
then
have
the
one.
quick second part of it was, at what
Okay.
point do you need to add more test in to not crash estrogen?
Okay, so at what point do you need to add in more testosterone with the goal of bringing up or maintaining estrogen at a healthy level? Well, I guess when the current testosterone dose has you below that.
Yeah.
Like if you have low estrogen to the point that you are feeling negative side effects, and then you go get blood work and it confirms that, maybe your estrogen's in the teens, or, whatever the case is, or lower, yeah, then that's a time that something needs to change. If you, in that scenario, if you're taking an aromatase inhibitor, it probably needs to come out, or it just needs to be less. Or if you're already not taking one, yeah, then, start with 70 milligrams of test on top of whatever you're doing for the week. That's 10 milligrams a day. And go from there. Or if you want to add like a round number for the week, 50, whatever the case is, add something. It's just going to be trial and error. One thing more and more that I've gotten back to, and that I want to discuss on this show, and it's because there's so many people now that want everything to be evidence-based. Everything has to be evidence-based. Everything has to be research-based. I could tell someone word for word how something works, and it could be all correct. And if it's not backed by a study or a research review, people dismiss it. And guys, like, you have to understand, like, I get it. I like the evidence-based stuff. I like research, and I like logic. I like trying to find things that make sense. I work within J3 University. I educate within there. Like, I understand the need and the desire for that. But also, you guys have to understand, like, the gap between where research is and where bodybuilding is right now is a light years. Bodybuilding is always going to be way ahead of the research that actually comes out. They're not testing on bodybuilders. They're not doing research on competitive psycho bodybuilders that are using performance enhancing drugs. They're not. So to dismiss something that you find, or that you feel, or that in the case of Tommy or myself or any other online coach, if you see a trend or something that happens over and over again amongst 25, 50, 100, 150 people, I'm not waiting for a research paper to come out and tell me, yes, you had it right. Like, I know I had it right. So I want anybody that's listening, this is just like a general PSA, because we've gotten so far away from kind of using intuition or just going with what has worked. Like, success leaves clues. We've been doing certain things in bodybuilding for as long as we have, for a reason. So I don't think that the best coaches, or the people that tote that line the best between experience and research, I don't think those are guys that are waiting on research to confirm the theories that they already have in real life.
Yeah, and they're also not waiting for research to confirm something to give them the confidence to try things either. I mean,
right.
It's this is trial and error. Like, I had to know what high estrogen felt like and the negatives it gave me to create that benchmark for myself, and then to be able to relay that to the coach.
Yep.
There's no, you can't just like, oh, my estrogen went up 2 points. How do I feel? All right, that's great. Like, it's
Right.
You're gonna drive yourself mad looking at it with that perspective. Like, this fear of estrogen is almost a problem too. Like,
It is.
yeah, don't ramp it up to the point where you're having night sweats, erection quality issues as a male, acne forming, bloating, and digestive issues like I had. Like, don't push to that limit. But
right.
Your IGF-1 will lower if your estrogen goes lower. If you're not using growth hormone because you can't afford it or access it, that doesn't help you grow. It's not a cascade for a growing environment. So there's not, for as many cons as there are for over pushing your estrogen too high, there's just as many for pushing it too low. So again, it's all person dependent. And I've had people who are almost like fearful every day. They're like playing with their nipples, like, oh, I think I feel something. I think I have gyno. And it's like, man, like, it will manifest. You'll know.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll know. Yeah, it becomes very obvious. Trust me.
Stop touching. If you're a male, stop touching your fucking nipples.
Yeah. Or unless that's just your thing, and then in which case do whatever the fuck you want, I guess. All right, I got one. So pre-workout meal, when to have it? Some say 2 hours. Some Oh, sorry. So okay, so pre-workout meal, when to have it? Some say 2 hours, some say 45 minutes.
No right or wrong. I prefer more time between that pre-workout meal and training. I don't like to have a full stomach.
Okay.
And I
All
I
right.
eat a lot too. So, but in
Yes.
a contest prep setting, if my food's lower and it's like the food volume's obviously decreased, probably closer to 30 to 45.
Yeah.
But peak off season, I might even go 2 hours, man. Like I
Yeah.
really need to be empty. I have an intra, like I drink over a liter of fluid when I train. So for me, I can't train with a full gut and be my best.
Yeah. 100%. That's a concise way to talk through the thought process for how it might work. I'll be honest, man. There have been times in contest prep that I eat my meal and then chug a pre-workout and walk out of the house, like,
Yeah.
because the last thing I want to do is be starving during this workout. I'm going to go train. I probably have post-workout cardio. I don't want to be starving. That's the last thing I want. Now, like you said, I think when you're shoving a ton of food, it depends on where your digestion and your midsection stand and how it feels for you to train. Like you said, 2 hours. A lot of times, if someone is doing a nutrient filled intra workout, I like at least 90 minutes for the pre workout meal, because you have to think that's almost another meal that's going down that intra workout. So it's like during the day, I wouldn't have meal 1 and 2 90 minutes apart. It would probably be 2 hours at least. So in that scenario where you basically have another feeding during your workout, you want the one prior to have cleared for the most part. So I think that's the case. Now, I think too, all of that is that same thought process in terms of the context can be used for food sources as well. I've seen like a lot of younger coaches or newer coaches recently. Everyone, there's pressure on all of us to make these fucking reels and to make them 30 seconds. So it's got to be clickbait and it's got to be, it's got to be spicy for the algorithm and all this shit. I get it. But I've seen people where they're like, oats are not a good pre-workout meal. Potatoes are not a good pre-workout meal. If your coach programs potatoes as a pre-workout meal, that doesn't make any sense. Fats should never be in a pre-workout meal. And it's like, guys, it depends. Like, it just depends. If you're someone that rips through food, let's say you're someone like you, Tommy, that rips through food. For whatever reason, we're not using an intra workout, and you have a 30-minute each way drive each way to the gym. I would probably have fats in your pre-workout meal, because it's gonna keep your blood sugar elevated while you train. I don't want your blood sugar to rise from the meal and then come crashing down to earth while you're training. And then also it depends on how much food and where you are. When I'm in contest prep, you're goddamn right. I'm gonna have oats pre-workout. I look forward to that shit all day. I'm absolutely having oats pre-workout. Potatoes would be another great choice, because guess what? It's gonna fill my stomach and I'm not gonna feel hungry and depleted while I'm training. So it just depends. If you're shoving 5,400 calories a day and your pre-workout meal consists of 140 grams of carbohydrates, I would agree. Probably not the best thing to do 280 grams dry of oats. You're probably going to shit yourself at the gym, but it just depends.
Yeah. No, there are no rules. And
There are no fucking rules. And like
I always get
I
back to
want
that.
that to be I want that to be reminded. Like it honestly, man, like I feel like I've went down all of this path because I didn't like some of the rules that were imposed on me elsewhere in my life. Like,
School.
yeah, school or fucking corporate America or any of this other shit. Like, it's fun because there's no rules. Like,
Yeah.
guess what? Heavy training works. High rep training works. Low volume works. High volume works. Fucking high carb works. High fat works. Like, man, there are no fucking rules. Like, we're conducting experiments on N of one. Like everyone is their own fucking individual entity. So yeah, there's going to be trends and different general rules that hold true, but man, there are just no rules. That's just the most fun way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, just like a quick story. We're talking about pre-workout meal and timing and blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah. Like, I've been in the gym back in Detroit with a power lifter who was like, you know, that sushi you can buy from the grocery stores that comes like a roll. He
Yikes.
was doing his warm up squatting and then eating those sushi in between warm ups. Like, try telling him about a pre-workout meal and
Right.
timing and all this
Right.
shit. He was fingering sushi into his mouth and then
Oh,
405 on his back. So like there's no
uh,
rules, dude. That was my story for like you can do whatever you want. If you can train optimally
right.
and you're not throwing up or you're not like
Yeah.
hitting too low of a blood glucose in a contest, like
Right.
eat in the
Man,
parking
and
lot
there's
and
so
walk
many
in.
different scenarios that work for people. I mean, Dante Trudell and DC Training have put a ton of muscle on people. Milo Sarchev and fucking God knows what insulin protocols have put muscle on people. FST7 has put muscle on people. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't really a
And if
big
you talk,
part. Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, Chad Nichols, I've heard has very high protein diets.
Yeah.
Milos is a guy who's more frequent meals with lower protein,
Yeah.
higher carb. So there's no rule. They've both built guys that are monsters as far as size.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like, I mean, I've done it all and I've made great progress on different situations. I worked with a coach and ran a protocol where it was like, you know, I'm eating fucking Rice Krispie treats in the parking lot going into the gym and, you know, eating cereal post workout. And then, you know, for a long period, one of my most successful periods of off season gaining was with John, where I literally just ate nothing but clean food for fucking 6 months. So you can, you know, there's different ways to do this shit. So I would like to see more of the discussions in our industry and just online, I guess, to be less black and white and dismissive of each other. Like there's so many different ways to do this shit.
Yeah.
All right, you're up.
Do you take different sups during off season versus contest prep? I don't know if he's talking about health sups, performance sups, PED sups. So we can kind of leave it open ended. But
All right, well, I'll answer about the drugs for sure. Yeah, there's definitely different stuff. In my case, like we talked through earlier, we talked through the reasoning, but Masteron has typically been viewed as like a contest prep only drug, the cutters. But it, you know, you accrete protein at, you know, just about the same rate as you do for all the other anabolics. So it does work. I will stick with that probably all year. Test you're going to have in all year, and the way that I do things, that's not really going to change. If you're on growth, I would say that can probably hang in. At worst, even for guys that are pretty water retentive, I'm going to run it at least until like 2 weeks out. So that's still the majority of the year. But then in terms of what changes, so then for a lot of guys, I've started just kind of proactively getting them all on 25 micrograms of T3 because it's going to go in at some point. And so I'd rather us, instead of having 3 weeks, you know, from weeks 19 to 16 weeks out where you stall, and then that's my marker to put it in, I'd rather just put it in at 19 and have 3 productive weeks. So that clenbuterol is awesome in contest prep. And that's pretty much one that you're going to exclusively kind of want to save for contest prep, in my opinion, or like fat loss phases. And trenbolone, of course, everyone wants to talk about it. Everyone knows about it. I like low dose tren, and I like it only for contest prep. I've heard and seen different scenarios. I've done it in the off season myself, and it made my food pretty tough to digest, and it made me a lunatic. So, yeah, I know there are others, but I'll shut up and let you go.
no, I mean, pretty much same sentiment. I've
Yeah,
done trying the off season, and for me, it's
yeah,
not enough to gain for what I'm going to lose potentially, as far as the
yeah,
heartburn, the potential sleep loss, the digestion issues.
yeah. Patience.
I'm not necessarily a total psycho on it, but I'm more psychotic than I am without it. So,
Right.
um,
And then you just have to live within that. I don't mean that I'm doing anything to anybody else.
yeah,
I'm just walking around in a head that's way less patient and angry.
yeah. But yeah, clan contest prep. I've done off season T3 as not
Interesting.
recently. It was a few years ago at a low, like a
Replacement dose.
like 12.5 or something, or
Oh,
25.
wow. Right on.
So,
How was it?
I mean, I was
How was
eating a
the
ton of food, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was probably like my highest caloric totals of eating. There
Yeah,
was some
what's
7,000 plus calorie days.
oh oh man.
Dude, that was when and I don't, none of my clients eat like this, but I was like those frozen Eggos, dude. I was eating a box a day of Eggo
They're
waffles.
great, dude. What, your little sugar-free syrup or what?
Sugar syrup, yeah.
Wow. See, that's the life
I
of Tony
filled each
Stiles.
square on the waffle with syrup.
Wow.
That was my rule. Unmeasured syrup.
Unmeasured syrup. Wow.
I was
See, this
sitting
is
up.
what I was saying before, and I need to say this again for the audience to hear because I'm sure a lot of them are feeling this alongside of me. But your experience within bodybuilding is just a unique one. There's not many people that go through bodybuilding living the life that you have had to live within bodybuilding.
It's different,
Dude,
I guess.
7,000 calories a day. I know I'm gonna get up there, especially I've been up there. I've been in the mid fives. But 7K, dude, like oof, that's another level of food.
It was a lot of eating. And that's why when,
Were you
I
on
hear someone,
Lantis?
yeah,
Okay.
I was like
So were you pretty revved up appetite wise?
20 to 30. Not
I mean,
like,
by day three,
yeah,
not so much.
but I can eat. I mean, I
Yeah.
can, it's more of just, I've created habits that I eat.
Yeah.
And even like if I get a point of resistance, it's just like sit back, chew, talk shit to myself, and then eat again. Like
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
just
No, I know.
it's mental at this point. But yeah, no, I've done off season T3, didn't get enough from it to see it as a benefit. A lot
Yeah.
of just puts the thyroid a very stressful environment. Like I've learned that I don't need over 7,000 calories to
Right.
be in a good growth environment. I
Right.
can get up to, 5,500 to 6,000
With good
and
digestion.
cleaner
Yeah.
food, waistline's
Yeah.
better, no bloating, no issue. So again, I did in my journey, I did things wrong, but at the time they were right at that time. And then looking back is where I could be like, okay, maybe that wasn't the best move, but and that's how bodybuilding goes. You got to stick with it long enough to be able to learn in reverse.
Dude, I'm
And
hungry right now, so I need to ask you, what the fuck were you eating on that day? So you're eating waffles with fully leaded syrup in there, not measured. So
yeah,
now we're talking probably 7,300 calories for the day then.
I was having 200 grams of carbs from Gatorade.
Oh,
So tearing my stomach up.
oh my God.
200 grams of carbs from shredded wheat, the cereal, because that one it's low
So
volume.
you were shitting 8 times a day?
Probably.
Definitely.
I was but what I learned about that food is
It's
that
all
it's
fiber, dude.
really high in iron too. And I
Yeah,
was having
yeah.
like blood pressure and hematocrit issues
Ooh,
because I was eating
scary.
the shredded wheat, obviously taking EQ at the time, and
Obviously.
Primo rice, the orange
I was just
box.
gonna say, and rice, regular rice.
Yeah, I did 6 servings of that a day. So
So was
just
it
a
a lot
lot.
of was it any BS or what? Like besides the waffles and the sugar or no? It
I
was
mean,
mostly
well,
bodybuilding food. Like were you eating cereal? What else?
yeah, I had cereal, Gatorade, waffles. I ate probably anywhere from 6 to 10 cups of jasmine rice a day.
Yeah.
Um,
And
you know,
who was helping you, or were you doing that on your own?
Dusty, but he
Okay.
gave me a lot of freedom to do
Yeah.
he would just, he would tell
Do
me
the
to have a
numbers.
certain amount of carbs and I would choose the
Yeah.
sources.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then I'd probably I would do a free meal like every other day.
Wow.
Good times, but also, man, like
Mini cut me kind of hates hearing that right now. So
I
we're gonna
pushed
move
my
on.
waistline out too. So
Yeah, true.
as far as supplements though, like gear, I mean,
True,
I
true,
feel
true,
like
true. Yeah.
pretty simple. Um, health supplements, I do the same things year round. I don't, if anything, I probably add more in prep.
I
I
have one that I can think of that definitely I would consider talking to the client about and basing it on blood work. But selenium, I think, is one that I look to possibly use and be more mindful of using it in prep than I would in an off-season setting
yeah, and potentially using
for
foods that
thyroid.
are high in selenium, like
Yes.
mushrooms have a high amount of selenium, so
Yeah.
good thyroid support there.
Yeah.
I use more kidney support in prep. My
Okay.
supplement Leviathan just to keep EGFR up, keep the
Yeah.
kidney function, because the drugs you're using in prep are gonna affect the kidneys. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And then thinking about it too, I think a sleep aid, if there wasn't something already in the off season, doesn't hurt because most likely you should be getting lean enough to where your sleep does become at least slightly deranged, so it doesn't hurt to have a sleep aid on hand. I like melatonin. I've kind of experimented on myself with some pretty high end doses of melatonin and only to positive results. So I don't know, maybe if I should not share how high, but I think for the average person, like 10 milligrams, there's no harm or negatives to 10 milligrams of melatonin to help you sleep, especially if you're in prep.
I get good sleep on melatonin. The problem I've found is that the next day I don't even feel like a human until the day is almost over.
How much have you taken? What at what dose?
That was 20.
That's fucking high, dude. I mean, you're a big guy, but that's high, and
Yeah.
especially that's high. Are you a consistent, like, is that a one off? You take it to just have one good night of sleep and then it does that to you?
No, that was an experiment over like a month.
Oh, really?
I've tried
See,
10, same thing. Like I
I've gone
think
up to
3 to 5
40.
would probably be almost all I need.
Okay. See, that's you. I have shitty sleep. And there's times that I smoke weed before bed, and then there's times that I quit and I go long periods without it. In those periods without it, my sleep big time suffers, and I've gone up to like 40 milligrams of melatonin. And because that it took that much just to get a good effect of falling asleep sooner, um, I didn't have the issue of feeling groggy. I would wake up and feel ready for the day because had I not taken it, I would have slept for 2 hours and then woken up and felt ready for the day.
Right. So for me, the sleep help that I've gotten the most out of, especially in prep, is by taking GABA before bed at like 1,500 milligrams, and that kind of turns my brain off to where I can like, because it's not necessarily an issue of staying asleep, other than the pee breaks. It's more of just like, especially working for yourself and being a bit, you're constantly like evaluating your performance, your coaching, and like, am I doing enough? Blah 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 blah. Like that's the type of conversations I have with myself when I lay my head down. And then it's almost like this excitement that kicks in, and it's like, man, fuck sleep, I got work to do. So the GABA really helps me like idle down and like there's a stress support supplement I use too, ashwagandha, rhodiola rosea, a few different
Yeah,
adaptogens.
I love the GABA. That's actually a part of I take that every night as well.
Mhm.
At least
That
right now I
ingredient
am.
in particular, I notice like I can pinpoint effects the day I
Yeah.
take it. It works.
Yep. Yeah. I would be careful though, because I've wasted. I tried. There was a period where I tried to take both melatonin and GABA, and then realized that they both are neurotransmitters and they fight for the same receptors. So it's kind of you're kind of getting a half-ass effect of both, um, from my understanding of it. If you take both, so if your issue is with like kind of that stress response, laying it down and falling right asleep, like Tommy described, that's me too. GABA is awesome. That is the one thing where I consistently take it. And it feels like after I put my head on the pillow, I don't remember anything, and then I just wake up the next day, which I think is how most people feel when they get good sleep. But most of the time, that's not the case. So, yeah, that was a good call out. That's actually like one of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, pound for pound, that's definitely one of my favorite
Yeah,
OTCs too.
just be careful with your dose. If you take too much, you're gonna feel like you snorted beta alanine or something. Like it's. Have you ever had that? Where you got crazy tingly and like flushed, and I'm I just get raw powder. I don't get the caps. I have like a big thing of like just raw GABA powder.
Oh, so it's probably more effective.
Well, that and my scale didn't register. Like I didn't drop enough powder for it to register the first couple times. So I'm just dropping it in, dropping it in, dropping it in. And then it starts to pick it up. And I did, 1500 or whatever it was. Whatever yielded 1500 milligrams. I take it, I go to lay down, bro, and it was like I had just fucking snorted pre-workout or something. It made me insane. So you got to be careful.
Good to know. I've never had that.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Are you up or me? I don't even know.
What did we just talk about?
I
What was
think
your
that
last question?
off-season subs versus prep subs.
Okay, so I am up. I thought this was interesting. Somebody asked anything philosophy wise, whether in training or diet or PEDs, that has changed over time.
Man, it's hard to pick just one thing. I feel like
I was going to say, how long do you have?
if you're not evolving, I feel like you're someone I don't want to be around.
That was my word for word answer. If you didn't say it by the time it got back to me, knowing that I had this question, was going to be that if you are working with a coach that never changes their mind, never opens up their mind to new theories or thoughts, they always just have the answer. They never tell you, hey, I don't know, I have to look into that. Man, you should turn and run. Like you want somebody that is always evolving and always growing, always learning. Like I'd said before, I just with my own body, my own self, have had like pretty loose protocols where I'm using a lot of insulin and eating Rice Krispie treats and sugary cereal and made progress. And then I had periods where for 6 months I ate nothing but clean bodybuilding food and made awesome progress. So obviously there are different philosophies that work. I think a mark of a good coach is someone that just understands how things work. And so the plan isn't something that's scripted or pulled out of a playbook. It's just, I know how these things work. I've tried different theories and seen different theories. And so based on the context of this here individual client, I'm going to put, this kind of dynamic individual thing together.
Yeah. No, that's how it should be. And that's in any industry. Like I don't want to work with some, go to a physician who still thinks it's 1985. I don't
100%.
Or a mechanic or anybody who's like refusing to adapt with time moving forward. And the times change. Industry standards change in every industry. So
do you have anything that jumps out, something that could be entertaining or funny? Because I have a couple that are egregious.
I mean, my overall perception of food for sure. Like we're talking about me eating waffles and Gatorade and shredded wheat and like that was I did all that and I was eating more food then and I was like in the 220 to 230 range. And now I've been up to in the 250 to 260 range on just purely clean food and maybe one free meal a week. I don't do cereals, Gatorade, and like, Dom opened me up to that with just getting back to the basics of like, if we're going to call ourselves athletes and call bodybuilding a sport, why aren't we, bodybuilding gets this thing of like, you got to eat a lot to grow, which is 100% true, but you don't have to eat a lot of shit to grow. If anything, you're probably not growing as well as you think you are if you're eating, 3 McDoubles every other day or the whatever, the garbage. Like cereal is a great option at times, but for me, the way I was doing, like 200 grams of carbs from cereal a day, there's no point
other than it's a lot of sugar.
Yeah, I was just lazy and didn't want to take the time to prep bodybuilding foods.
I was
So
just going to say that, like anything else, when you're talking about like eating high quantities of food to grow into being a big bodybuilder, if you choose quick and easy in any aspect, your food, your PED protocol, what you're going to do with training, any of these things, it's a short-sighted failure. Like anything else, we talk about playing the long game all the time. Part of that is just not doing things that are easiest in the here and now. Like in regards to this conversation, playing the long game would be knowing, hey, in the long term, this is not only going to keep me leaner, but it's going to keep my internal health in check by doing this. It may be slower than blowing up on a bunch of shitty food right now, but I'm going to play the long game and I'm going to do it all with clean food. Like there's a difference in that. You can expect a different result in that. For me, I would say for PEDs, the obvious one for me is just how I implement things and how I use things. For me, it was always like coming up. It's like, test is best, 500 milligrams, a milligram of Arimidex every other day or whatever the case is. And that's just, I've done high test only cycles, 1200 milligrams of test only. And I was just always a watery, like high blood pressure mess. So, changing my philosophy about how I do it for me and for most of the people that I help in terms of, basically just replacement level or higher or slightly higher than replacement level testosterone. And then everything else does the work. That's been a game changer for me and the people that I help. So that's a big one. And I feel like I'd have a million in training. My training philosophies are ever evolving. So it's tough to say.
it's funny, they evolve so much, and it's sometimes you come back to something that you got away from because you were chasing something. Like how many times did you need a body part to come up and then you started training it more rather than focusing on training it more efficiently? I did that where it was like, oh, I need my chest to grow. Boom, 30 sets a week. It's like, dude, you haven't actually figured out how to do 1 or 2 quality sets with your chest yet. You're a front delt presser.
Yep.
Break it down, go backwards. And you end up like going around and coming right back to where you were, but you had to do a bunch of other shit wrong to finally be like, okay, that didn't work. What's the best path to progress? So I'm able to show that to clients now, especially my young dudes who like come to me and are like, if you tell me I'm going to blow up, I'm going to actually beat you down in that moment and make you understand you will not blow up. There is no blowing up in bodybuilding.
Right.
Minus if you use a shit ton of gear, you might make a 3-year leap in 1 year, but that's Russian roulette. And I'm not saying if you can do that, by all means, do it. I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I'm just telling you it might work out, it might not. But if you're going to do things with your health in mind, there's no blowing up. It is a long game, and there's no way to shortcut that minus what I just said. So you can eat as much shit food as you want, thinking you're growing. You can take as much drugs as you want, and you might be growing, but there's damage happening. We have a shelf life for how long we can push the PEDs. And I will say, like, I was kind of a minimalist with my gear, and I didn't get pushed by coaches in the beginning too far outside my boundaries. And I was eating shittier though year round. I was thinking because I'm a guy who needs to grow, I always need to eat junk food, or I don't have an appetite for clean food. But I have, like, if you tell me you have an appetite, you don't have an appetite for like steak and sweet potatoes, but you can go to In-N-Out and put down 2 double doubles, you're lying. You just don't want to take the time and the effort to eat the steak and sweet potatoes.
It's quick and easy. That's what I was saying before. Yep.
If America has poor blood work and diabetes and high blood pressure and cardiac failure are rampant, they're not taking PEDs. They're not doing bodybuilding things. That's the norm. So if you're going to eat like that and do bodybuilder things, my blood work was not good on like half the amount of gear I use now because I ate poorly. Like that was my life. I thought, I'm the guy that needs cheat meals and off-plan food, and I can't grow quickly, so I need to eat dirty bulk. I didn't get enough out of it to make it worth it. And that's why I can show guys now, like, hey, this, 3,000 calories from McDonald's is not the same as 3,000 calories of clean food throughout the day. There's no fucking way. And
Yeah, if we're just talking about straight weight loss or gain, the calories in, calories out thing works outside of any hormonal imbalances that might be going on. But if we're talking about optimizing body composition, no, I don't want to hear that a calorie is a calorie. You're wrong. You're wrong. Show me somebody that's fucking huge, impressive, or crazy shredded and super impressive, and I will show you somebody that really paid attention to the not only the amount but the quality of the food that they ate. And that's just the way that it is. Like, that's one of those things. Oh, well, researching this many studies, shut the fuck up. We have 50 years of guys eating clean and getting in unbelievable shape, growing to unbelievable size. Like, it's yeah, I think that's a good spot to end it, because I'm about to go on another 40-minute rant. So yeah, for Tommy Stiles, I'm Joseph PIRCHER. This was the Thinking Man's podcast. Until next time, guys, we're out.